It was just past 11 p.m. when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I had just finished wiping down the kitchen counters after a 12-hour shift and was ready to collapse into bed. But the message on my lock screen made me freeze. "Elena, you need to see this, Denise." I debated sending it, but you deserve to know. Attached was a 30-second video. My heart began to pound. I tapped play, hands trembling slightly. The screen lit up to show Haley, my 27-year-old daughter, lounging on Elena's couch in her usual loungewear, holding a wine glass like she was born into luxury. Across from her sat Elena's daughter, my niece Carmen. Haley rolled her eyes dramatically. "My mom is such a disaster. I swear she's done nothing with her life. It's so humiliating." Carmen shifted uncomfortably. "She's worked really hard, though, hasn't she?" Haley laughed, swirling her wine. "Yeah, at a diner and scrubbing people's toilets. That's not hard work, it's pathetic. That's why I never have friends over. I mean, who brags about their mom being a house cleaner in freaking Bakersfield? Ugh, it's tragic." The video ended, but the words kept ringing in my ears. Pathetic, tragic, embarrassing. I sat on the edge of my bed, stunned. My fingers clutched the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. This was the child I gave everything for? 2 jobs, 15-hour days, skipping meals to pay her tuition. Coming home so exhausted I barely remembered climbing into bed. Every extra dollar went to Haley. New clothes, school trips, even her out-of-state college dream. And this is how she sees me? My chest ached with a pain I hadn't felt since her father walked out on us. I stared down at the message beneath the video. "Elena," I confronted her after. "She didn't even seem sorry, Denise. She meant it." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I walked to the bathroom, gripping the sink like I might fall. All the years I spent building her a stable life, working weekends, cleaning houses for the wealthier women in town, picking up night shifts at that greasy spoon diner. And in the end, she looked at me and saw nothing but shame. I took a deep breath, blinking back hot tears. I could have screamed. I could have stormed into her room and thrown the video in her face. But no, that would be too easy. No, Haley needed to learn. Not through yelling, not through guilt. She needed a lesson life would never let her forget. And I was going to be the one to teach it. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, like always. The sun hadn't even touched the Bakersfield sky. I made my usual black coffee and sat silently at the kitchen table. The words from the night before played in my mind like a broken record. She's never accomplished anything. She's embarrassing. It's tragic. I looked toward the hallway. She was still asleep, of course. 27 years old, and still living under my roof. Rent-free, jobless, and completely fine with it. Waking up at noon like life was a vacation. I had made things too easy for her. But not anymore. At 12:17 p.m., Haley shuffled into the kitchen wearing a crop top and pajama shorts, scrolling her phone. "Morning," she mumbled, yawning. "Afternoon," I corrected, sipping my coffee. She poured herself a bowl of imported organic granola and oat milk, the expensive kind I paid for, and sat at the counter. Without looking up, she said, "I need your card later. That boutique on 23rd has this cute faux leather jacket on sale." I didn't even flinch. "No." She blinked. "No? That's right," I said, setting down my mug. "I'm not paying for anything else. Not today. Not ever again." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Wait, are you serious? Is something wrong? Did something happen at work?" I leaned forward, arms crossed. "You want to know if something happened at work?" I paused. "Well, I've spent the last 20 years breaking my back just to keep this house running. I scrubbed floors, wait tables, work holidays, and for what? So you can call me a loser behind back?" Her mouth parted. "Elena sent me the video." Silence. She opened her mouth. "Mom, come on. You're blowing it out of..." "No, Haley. Let's be clear. You called me embarrassing. Said you couldn't invite your friends here because I work in a diner. That I'm a joke. That I've never accomplished anything." She rubbed her temples. "It was just venting. You take things so personally." I let out a bitter laugh. "You think this is about feelings? This is about reality. You've been living like a queen, funded by the same woman you mock." She crossed her arms. "Parents are supposed to provide. That's literally your job." I stared at her, and in that moment, something inside me clicked. "You're absolutely right," I said calmly. "Parents are supposed to provide for their children, and I did." I walked over to the drawer, pulled out a crisp envelope, and slid it across the counter. "What's this?" she asked, already frowning. "Open it." Inside was a job application for a retail store, a local room for rent ad, and a handwritten note. 30 days. You're on your own. Her face went pale. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm giving you a chance," I said, "to grow up." "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. You want to mock where you came from? Fine, but not while living off the woman you think is beneath you." She slammed the envelope down. "This is crazy." "No, what's crazy is me working myself to the bone while you sit in this house judging me." She looked stunned, scared, even. Good. It was time. I folded my arms and said the words that would change everything. "You have 30 days, Haley. Welcome to the real world." For the first time in years, the house was quiet. Not peaceful, just tense. Haley didn't speak to me the rest of the day after I handed her that envelope. She stormed into her room, slammed the door, and blasted music like she was 16 again. But I didn't go after her. I was done chasing a daughter who thought she was better than the woman who raised her. The next morning, I brewed my coffee like usual. The Bakersfield sun was just rising, painting the sky in dusty oranges and purples. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through my bills, electric, water, groceries, every item carefully budgeted. At 12:32 p.m., I heard her door creak open. She walked into the kitchen slowly, eyes puffy from sleep, phone clutched in her hand like a shield. She opened the fridge, pulled out the almond milk I bought, poured it over her overpriced cereal, and sat down. Not a word. I didn't say anything either. She glanced up once, waiting for me to cave, to offer an apology, to say it was all a bluff. I didn't. After a long moment, she finally muttered, "You're being dramatic." I set my mug down. "Am I?" She crossed her arms. "Over one stupid video?" I looked at her squarely. "That stupid video was you telling someone I'm a loser, that you're embarrassed I'm your mother, that I've never done anything worth being proud of." Haley stared at the table, chewing slowly. "It was just a joke." "No, it was your truth." Silence stretched between us. I stood up, dropped my coffee mug into the sink, and added, "You've got 29 days. She flinched, just slightly, but didn't say another word. That week, she sulked like a child who'd been grounded. She stayed in her room, doom-scrolled TikTok, and barely looked at me. But by Thursday, things started to shift. I came home from my late shift at the diner around 10 p.m. and found her sitting on the couch, laptop open, job boards pulled up. She closed it quickly when I walked in. I said nothing, but I noticed. On Saturday, I was folding laundry when she poked her head into my room. "Do you know if that gas station off Union is hiring?" she asked, eyes hesitant. I raised an eyebrow. "You thinking about applying?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe." I nodded slowly. "They usually post signs if they're hiring. Go in and ask. Dress decent. Bring a resume." Her face tightened. "I don't have a resume. You have a degree. Start there." She lingered a second, then disappeared back into the hallway. Progress. Tiny, reluctant progress. 2 days later, I came home to find her slouched on the couch looking exhausted. She kicked off her sneakers and groaned. "Retail is hell." "You got the job?" I asked, surprised. She nodded. "Part-time. Stocking shelves at the grocery store on 7th pays garbage." "But it's a start," I said, pouring myself some water. She didn't reply, just stared blankly at the ceiling. Then, with a hollow voice, she said, "My feet are killing me." Some guy dropped a jar of pickles and walked off like it wasn't his problem. Another lady screamed at me because her coupon expired, and my manager made me restock all the water cases by myself. I leaned against the counter. "Sounds like real life?" She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Is this what it was like for you? Every day?" I looked her in the eyes. Every single one. She didn't say anything after that, but she didn't roll her eyes either. By the 10th day, she started asking questions. "How do you pay for utilities? Why is rent in Bakersfield so high if wages are so low? Do you budget every week?" It was like watching someone wake up after a long sleep, squinting at the harsh light of reality for the first time. One evening, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator, the apartment listings I'd printed, and a notepad. She looked up and said, "Even if I worked full-time, I'd only have enough for rent and gas. No savings, no groceries." I nodded. "Welcome to adulthood." She swallowed. "How did you do this for 20 years? "Because I had no choice," I said. "And because I had you." Her eyes dropped to the paper again. The turning point came on day 15. She came home from work, dropped her bag, and held up her phone. The girl training me just got a second job cleaning offices at night. Said the pay is decent. She offered to put in a word for me. I raised my eyebrows. You thinking about it? She hesitated. I don't want to, but I think I have to. I smiled faintly. Now you're starting to understand. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. I thought I was better than you. I looked up, surprised by her honesty. She continued, because I had a degree, because I spoke better, because I wasn't scrubbing floors. But this past week, I've never felt so tired or so small. I walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not small, Haley, but you were blind. She nodded slowly. Not anymore. On day 20, she woke up before me. I heard the clatter of dishes in the kitchen and smelled toast, slightly burnt, but it still made me smile. She handed me a plate of scrambled eggs and said, It's not much, but I figured after 27 years of you feeding me, I owed you one. I chuckled, taking a bite. Could use some salt. She laughed. Yeah, well, gratitude doesn't come with seasoning skills. I looked at her, really looked, and saw it. For the first time, she wasn't just my daughter. She was a young woman, trying. And that was everything. By day 21, the rhythm of the house had changed. No more sleeping until noon. No more empty snack wrappers or $7 lattes charged to my account. Haley was waking up early. She made her own breakfast, usually toast or oatmeal, and left for her part-time job without being reminded. I hadn't heard her complain in nearly 3 days. It was strange, unfamiliar almost, like someone had swapped out my daughter for a quieter, more focused version. She wasn't just existing anymore, she was trying. That Thursday morning, I stepped into the kitchen and saw her sitting at the table, notebook open, a calculator in one hand and a highlighter in the other. What are you working on? I asked, pouring myself some coffee. She looked up, her eyes tired but alert. Budgeting. Really? Yeah, she said, flipping the notebook around. I've been tracking my paychecks, figuring out what I can afford. Rent, utilities, food. Turns out adulthood is just math and stress. I laughed, a real one. Took you long enough to figure that out. She smiled faintly. I'm also applying to other jobs. There's this small marketing agency in town looking for an admin assistant. It's entry level, but it's a start. I raised an eyebrow, impressed. Marketing, huh? I mean, I did get my degree in it, she said a little sheepishly. Thought I'd at least try to use it. I sipped my coffee, hiding my pride. Good. Then she said something I never expected to hear. I've also been saving. It's not much, a couple $100 so far. But I want to start paying rent, even if it's small. I don't want to live here for free anymore. I stared at her. Not because I doubted her, but because, for the first time in years, she meant it. The next few days, I watched her settle into this new version of herself. She started doing her own laundry. She cooked her own meals. Usually simple things like rice bowls or pasta. But she never once asked me to help. She didn't ask to borrow my card. She even returned the Netflix password I'd caught her using on the sly. And when I came home from a night shift on day 24, I found the dishes already washed and a note on the counter. Did the kitchen. Get some rest. Haley. I sat down on the couch and stared at that note for a long time. This wasn't about chores or payback. This was respect. On day 25, she had a job interview. Not at the grocery store. Not for night cleaning, but for the marketing agency she'd mentioned. She came out of her room wearing a navy blazer I didn't even know she owned, hair tied back, holding a folder with printed resumes. How do I look? She asked nervously. Like someone who knows what she wants, I said. She smiled. Let's hope they see it too. She didn't come back for hours. When she finally did, her cheeks were flushed with excitement. They liked me, she said, almost breathless. They said they'd let me know in a few days, but I think it went really well. I gave her a tight hug. Whether you get it or not, I said, I'm proud of you for showing up. That night, she cooked spaghetti, her best attempt yet. It was a little salty, but it was made with love. On day 27, something unexpected happened. She came into my room with an envelope. Inside, $200 in cash. What's this? I asked. My first contribution to rent, she said softly. I want to help, even if it's not much. I stared at the bills, heart pounding. This wasn't about money. This was about accountability. It was her way of saying, I see you now. I reached over, pushed the envelope back into her hand, and said, save it, use it for your new place. She blinked. What if I don't get the job? You'll figure it out. You already are. By day 28, she was browsing apartments seriously. None were glamorous. Most were overpriced for what they offered. But I watched her do the math. Circling listings, calling landlords, scheduling viewings. She was doing the work. It was surreal. For years she had coasted through life, blaming everyone, me, her father, her circumstances, for why she wasn't further ahead. Now she was building something from scratch. On day 29, I came home and found her sitting at the kitchen table in silence. You okay? I asked. She nodded, then held up her phone. I got the job. I froze. At the agency? She grinned, tears in her eyes. I start next Monday. I covered my mouth, overwhelmed. Denise, she whispered, I'm gonna be okay. I walked over and hugged her tight. You already are. Day 30 came quietly. No explosions, no drama, just a quiet packing of boxes, some folded clothes, and a stack of printouts taped together, her new lease agreement. She was moving into a shared apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, roommate, window that stuck halfway. But it was hers. Before she left, she turned to me in the doorway, suitcase in hand. Thank you, Mom. For everything. I smiled. I didn't do it to be thanked. I know. That's what makes it mean more. She hugged me, not the quick, awkward kind she used to give, but the long, full kind you give when words aren't enough. And then she walked out the door. Not in anger, not in entitlement, but in growth. And for the first time I felt like I hadn't failed as a mother. I had just taken the long road to get here. The apartment was small, not cozy small, tight with creaky floors and a bathroom fan that buzzed like a dying mosquito. But to Haley, it might as well have been a castle. Her very first space, her name on the lease, her key on the ring. I helped her move in on a quiet Sunday morning. Bakersfield's heat was already creeping up by 9 a.m., and my back protested every box we carried up those narrow stairs. She didn't complain. Not once. She unpacked her things in silence, hair tied up, face flushed, focus sharp. There was no music playing, no distractions. Just a woman who knew this time, this moment was hers to earn. When we finished, we sat on the floor with fast food burgers and 2 bottles of cold water. She looked around the apartment and whispered, "It's not much." I shook my head. "No, it's everything." She smiled, the small, real kind I hadn't seen in years. Then she said, "I'm scared." I nodded slowly. "Good, that means you're awake." The first week was quiet. She texted me updates, short ones, made my first grocery run, bought ramen and apples. My neighbor plays drums at 11 p.m. I want to cry. Why is dish soap $5? I replied with encouragement, sometimes a laughing emoji. But I didn't rush to rescue her. That time had passed. Still, I kept my phone next to my pillow every night, just in case. On day 5, she called. Not text, called. Her voice was shaky. "Do you have a minute?" I sat down at the kitchen table, heart already thumping. Of course. I had to choose between doing laundry or buying gas. I chose gas. Now I'm out of clean clothes. I bit my lip, staying quiet. I didn't think it would be this tight. I thought once I had a real job, things would level out. I waited a beat, then asked, "You want me to cover your laundry?" She didn't answer right away. "No," she said finally. I just needed to say it out loud. "That it's hard." I smiled softly. "It is," she sighed. "Thanks for listening, Mom." Always. By week 2, she was settling into her job. She told me about her boss, a woman named Gina who wore leopard print blazers and cursed like a trucker. "She's intense," Haley said, "but she's smart. She built the agency from nothing." "Sounds familiar," I said with a smirk. Haley went quiet for a second, then said, "Yeah, I guess it does." On a Friday evening, she stopped by the house. I opened the door and barely recognized her. Hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, slacks instead of sweatpants, a tote bag instead of that ridiculous purse she used to carry. "Hey, Ma," she said, grinning. "I brought dinner, my treat." We ate takeout on the couch, and she told me about her week, her first team meeting, the spreadsheet she'd learned to build, even how she'd messed up an email blast and had to stay late fixing it. I just listened. Let her own her victories and her stumbles. Then, toward the end of the meal, she asked quietly, "Did you ever feel like you were drowning?" I set my chopsticks down. "Every day," she exhaled. "It's like you hold it all together but barely. One wrong move and it's over." I nodded. That's the invisible tax of poverty, sweetheart. Constant stress, constant vigilance. She looked down at her food. I used to think people just needed to try harder. But it's not that simple, is it? No, it's not, I said. But I'm glad you see that now. By week 3, her voice changed. She wasn't scared anymore. She was focused. When we spoke, she didn't whine. She planned. I'm opening a savings account next month, just for emergencies. I might ask for more hours if I can prove myself by the next quarter. I'm thinking of doing online night classes, maybe project management. It was like watching a storm break, revealing clear skies. She was becoming the woman I always knew was hiding behind the excuses. Then, one night, I got another message from her. Haley, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why did you never date again after Dad? I stared at the screen. That wasn't the question I expected. I thought about it. A long time. Then I replied, because I was too busy surviving, and because no one ever loved me the way I loved you. She didn't respond right away, but 10 minutes later she sent, I see that now. I'm sorry I didn't before. The next weekend, I found a small envelope slipped under my front door. Inside, $100 in cash, and a handwritten note. Not because you asked for it, but because I finally understand what it took to raise me, H. I pressed the paper to my chest. Tears welled in my eyes. Because this wasn't just rent, it was respect. The next time we had dinner, she insisted on cooking. Grilled chicken, roasted potatoes, sautéed spinach. Nothing fancy, but made with love. As we ate, I watched her carefully. Her movements were steadier. Her confidence was real. And somewhere deep in my chest, a pressure I didn't even know I was holding lifted. She didn't need me to carry her anymore. And strangely, I wasn't sad. I was proud. That night, as I watched her wash the dishes in my kitchen, humming softly to herself, I realized something. Maybe the goal of motherhood wasn't to protect your child forever. Maybe it was to prepare them, to protect themselves. And Haley? She was ready. It was almost 10 p.m. when my phone buzzed. I had just sat down on the couch, flipping through old family photo albums. I smiled at one of Haley in elementary school, gap-toothed, holding a science fair ribbon. Back when she thought I was a superhero. Then the screen lit up again. Haley, I messed up. Bad. My heart dropped. I called her immediately. She picked up after the second ring. Are you okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence. Then her voice came through, small and shaky. I got fired. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of her apartment complex. She was sitting on the front steps, hair loose, mascara smudged under her eyes. I hadn't seen her cry in years. She climbed into the passenger seat without a word. I handed her a tissue and waited. After a few deep breaths, she finally spoke. I missed a deadline. An important one. Gina was furious. She stared out the window. I forgot to send out a batch of reports. They were supposed to go to a client before the weekend. I got distracted, then overwhelmed. I didn't say anything. I thought I could fix it before she noticed. She trailed off. And? She noticed, she whispered. And I lied. I told her the client never responded. But she checked the logs. I was caught. So, she let me go. I didn't say anything right away. She glanced at me, voice trembling. I thought I was doing everything right. I was budgeting, working hard, trying, and now, it's all gone. I placed a hand on her shoulder. It's not gone. It's just shaken. Back at her apartment, she curled up on the couch like she used to when she was little and sick with the flu. I made us tea and sat beside her in silence. Finally, she asked, Are you disappointed in me? I looked at her, really looked. No, I said softly. I'm proud of you. She blinked. Proud? Because a year ago you would have blamed everyone else. You would have denied it, lied and kept lying. But this time you owned it. You told the truth. And now you're sitting here facing it instead of running from it. She wiped her eyes. It just hurts so much. Growth always does, I said. Over the next week, Haley stayed quiet. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask to come back home. She kept applying for jobs, sending out resumes, even went to a few interviews, but nothing landed. She texted less often, not because she didn't want to talk, but because she didn't want to admit how hard it was. I recognized the silence. I had lived inside that silence for years. The kind that wraps around your chest at night and whispers, maybe you're not enough. Then came the call. Saturday morning. I was at the diner, refilling someone's coffee, when my phone rang. Mom, Haley said, voice hoarse. Can I come home, just for a while? I froze. She continued, I need time to get back on my feet. I thought I could handle this, but I can't. I'm tired. I'm drowning. Please. There it was, that moment every parent dreads, the fork in the road. Do you rescue them again? Or do you trust them to rise? I closed my eyes. Then I asked one question. What's your plan? She hesitated. Plan? I softened my tone. Haley, I love you, and you will always have a place in my heart. But if you're coming back, you need a purpose, not just shelter. What happens after you move back in? What's your next move? She was quiet. Then finally, I don't know. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Then I need you to figure it out first. Her voice cracked. So you're saying no? I'm saying not yet. Silence. Then, okay, click. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced with doubt and guilt. Was I being too harsh? Should I have opened the door the way I always used to? But deep down I knew, if I let her fall now, I was giving her the chance to stand taller later. 3 days passed, no calls, no texts, just silence. I forced myself not to reach out. She needed this. But Lord, it hurt. Then, on the 4th day, a knock at my door. I opened it, heart racing. Haley stood there, holding a folder. She looked tired, but different. Grounded, clear. I came to show you something, she said. Inside the folder was a printed budget, a new resume, a list of part-time jobs she'd applied to, and a cover letter she'd written for a night class scholarship program. I don't have all the answers, she said, but I'm not asking to move home anymore. I'm asking for advice. I'm ready to figure this out, for real. Tears welled in my eyes. I stepped aside. Come in. We sat at the table for hours, reviewing her plans, tightening her budget, rewriting her resume. I offered her tips, but didn't take over. This wasn't my journey anymore, it was hers. And for the first time since she was a little girl, she let me guide her, not save her. Before she left, I packed her a small bag, some groceries, a few leftover containers of stew, a bar of dark chocolate she liked. She hugged me tight. Thank you for not bailing me out. I kissed her cheek. Thank you for choosing not to quit. And as she walked down the driveway with her head high and shoulders straight, I realized something. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can say isn't, I'll fix it for you. It's, I believe you can fix it yourself. 3 months passed. The Bakersfield summer gave way to a golden fall, and with it came small changes I never imagined I'd see. Haley didn't just bounce back. She rebuilt. After that folder moment, she kept her promise. Not to me, but to herself. She got a part-time office assistant job at a logistics company on the south end of town. Not fancy, not creative, but it paid the bills. She also started taking online classes twice a week through a community scholarship. It wasn't a flashy MBA or some Ivy League pipeline. It was real work, and she was doing it. On a crisp Friday evening in early October, she invited me over to her apartment. When I stepped inside, I hardly recognized it. Gone were the cluttered corners and mismatched dishes. She had curtains now, a real desk, not just a folding table. Books stacked beside her laptop, a calendar full of deadlines. She handed me a steaming mug of tea, not oat milk lattes or overpriced sugar bombs. Just tea. I wanted to say thank you, she said as we sat down, but not just for the past few months. I tilted my head. I mean, for all of it. For the years you worked doubles. For the birthdays you still made special even when we were broke. For not leaving, even when I treated you like crap. Her voice cracked. For loving me, even when I didn't love myself. I reached over and squeezed her hand. You were always worth the fight, I said softly. She shook her head. You shouldn't have had to fight so hard. That night, after dinner, we stood on her tiny balcony, watching the city lights flicker like stars in motion. She exhaled slowly. I used to think success meant being better than where you came from, she admitted. Now I think it means being proud of it. I blinked, surprised. Then she added, you weren't the loser I made you out to be. You were the blueprint. That moment, those exact words, made every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every fight worth it. 1 week later, she called me with news. I got offered a full-time position, she said, voice shaking with excitement. Same company, better pay, benefits, and a real title, project coordinator. I whooped so loudly I scared the dog. She laughed. It's not exactly my dream job, but it feels right. Because it's yours, I said. You earned it. She paused, then in a soft voice asked, can I take you out to dinner? My treat, no coupons. I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. I'd love that. The restaurant wasn't fancy, a little Italian place tucked away in an alley near downtown. But Haley wore a pressed shirt, real heels, and a proud smile. When the check came, she didn't hesitate. She paid with her own card. Not mine. Not her father's. Hers. It was just pasta, but it tasted like victory. After dinner, we walked slowly to her car. She stopped suddenly and turned to me. "There's one more thing," she said. Something I've wanted to say but couldn't. I waited. She took a shaky breath. "I know I hurt you. What I said that day at Aunt Elena's, it was cruel. I can't take it back, but I need you to know I didn't believe it." I looked at her gently. "Then why say it?" "Because I was ashamed of myself," she admitted, "and it was easier to mock you than admit I was the one going nowhere." Tears pooled in her eyes. "I see you now, Mom. Not as someone who sacrificed, but as someone who survived. You didn't fail. You succeeded in ways I couldn't even recognize back then." I hugged her, tighter than I had in years, and whispered, "I forgave you the moment you started becoming who you were meant to be." A few days later, she dropped by my place again. But this time, not for comfort or advice. She came with a plan. "I've been saving," she said, laying out a folder on my table. "And if things keep going this way, I'll be ready for my own house in a year or two." I raised an eyebrow. "A house?" she nodded. "A small one. A fixer-upper, maybe. I want something real, something I built." I felt a rush of pride swell in my chest. "Let me know when it's time to paint the walls," I smiled. "I'm good with a brush." She laughed. "You're good at everything, Mom. I just never saw it before." That night, I sat alone on my porch. I watched the sun dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. I thought about all the years I spent worrying if I'd failed her, if I'd done too much or not enough. But now, watching her become her own woman, I realized I didn't raise a perfect daughter. I raised a resilient one. And that was enough. More than enough. People think revenge is fire and fury, but I've learned something else. The best revenge is transformation. Not mine. Hers. It wasn't about making her suffer. It was about letting her fall. And watching her learn to get back up without me catching her. And now, she's not just standing. She's running. And I've never been more proud to let go.